We are in an environment where we are constantly stimulated. We're constantly checking our email, checking our phone, checking the news, getting pinged by other people, trying to think about where do I need to be now and here and tomorrow, and what's my mortgage situation looking like, and am I saving enough for retirement? And we've evolved to this place where our society is constantly driving a stimulus driven environment versus a relaxed, calm environment. And our brains are not evolved to be in this. And this is, according to many theories and according to many researchers, reasons why we see so much high stress, see so much mental health challenges. So looking at things like anxiety and depression, there's likely tie-ins to the fact that we are in environments that are not conducive to our mental health.
Welcome back to the 10 Adventures podcast. I'm excited to talk about the science behind the outdoors and why it makes us feel so good. Here to share his expertise is Dr. Jamey Maniscalco, a PhD neuroscientist, wellness consultant, and former pharmaceutical consultant. Jamey left consulting and academia to focus on creating meaningful human-driven solutions to well-being. His work now centers on helping people and teams reclaim health and purpose through approachable, science-backed wellness practices. There's a lot there, and I'm excited to talk about all of it. Hi, Jamey. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Richard.
It's great to chat. This is the first podcast where I think both of us have been outdoors, and it just, in my case, happened randomly. The kids are inside screaming in a small chalet, so I had to come outside. But it's great. We're talking about how important the outdoors are, and we're both outdoors. What a coincidence.
Absolutely. It felt so apropos. I was like, should I sit in my office or should I sit on the deck? And I was like, no, 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 no. Certainly for this podcast, it's very appropriate to be outside and live what I preach.
Can you talk a little bit before, just as we start, about your personal journey and dealing with
Oh.
burnout, disconnection to a life centered around the outdoors, movement, meaningful health?
So I grew up in the Midwest in Chicago, and while Chicago's got a lot of beautiful outdoor spaces, they're very curated and manicured, kind of suburban outdoor spaces, parks, things like that. We've got the lakefront, which is gorgeous, but it's a very big city, a lot of people, and I'm not a crowd kind of person. And so I ended up spending a lot of time indoors growing up. And I grew up in a family where I had a very high achieving father professionally. Wonderful person, but really set this tone of you work really hard, and you do as much as you can. You provide for your family, and that's what it means to be a good man in this life. That's kind of what I absorbed, whether he said it explicitly or not, through his actions. And so as I moved into college and I moved into after college graduate school, I really embraced a work hard approach to life, not a work hard, play hard. And so here I was focused on achievement, 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 driven certainly by goals, but also by some anxiety, some concern, some worry. Am I good enough? Am I going to achieve enough? Am I going to do anything that looked anything like what my father was able to achieve? I think all of that sat with me. And here, this really led to a life in which I worked. And if I wasn't working, I was concerned about not working. And if I was trying to relax, say through exercise, I wasn't actually relaxing. Exercise for me turned into something that actually added stress. I needed to make sure that I was hitting the right minutes per mile on my runs, that I needed to run a certain distance each day to make sure I was getting the health benefits. But it wasn't something that relaxed me and made me really calm. It was something that actually drove more stress. And so through graduate school, I got to a place where I was burnt out, I was exhausted, and the things that should be relaxing me, social relationships, getting out into the outdoors, exercise and movement, actually weren't there for me because I didn't cultivate them in a way that was healthy in retrospect. And it wasn't until after graduate school and actually after pharmaceutical consulting, when my wife and I moved out to Colorado, which is where I am right now, that I really learned to embrace the outdoors in a way that was much more fundamentally enriching, in a way that allowed me to appreciate the beauty of being outside, in a way that allowed me to embrace the time being outside as a time that should be relaxed, not just because that's the point of life in my perspective, but also because those times are restorative. improve. Those are the times that are actually going to help you go back to your high achieving workplace, back to your academic setting, whatever it might be, and do better in that setting because it restores your attention, it reduces your stress, things like that. And honestly, for me, I think I was fortunate that we happened to move, well, pretty intentionally, but we happened to move to a place that's um, really encourages outdoor exploration, and it's gorgeous and it's wonderful to do, because I'm not sure how successful I would have been personally in finding that in an environment that wasn't as conducive. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. Part of it is just this goal set mindset we have in Western cultures where we're always, focusing on setting goals and achieving our goals. And there's all this talk of side hustles these days, and kind of people are always working. And I think it's interesting. You kind of it sounds like you kind of accidentally realized the power of nature. And so is that really the case? You moved to Colorado and you just found you could find peace when you were outside just exploring, and you could kind of disconnect from all the goals?
Absolutely. I think the accidental nature of it and maybe serendipity is absolutely the right way to describe that. And I feel so fortunate. I think we intentionally tried to get to Colorado, but maybe not for the right reasons. So this was back in 2016 to 2018 when we were starting to look at these, job prospects for me. My wife works remote, and so she was able to go pretty much wherever. So it was really on where I could be employed. And we were focused on Colorado, in part because she was always a big outdoors person. She grew up that way in the Northeast here in the United States, but I wasn't. And she really brought me into this. But then also, I think part of it was the allure of really great photos, the allure of everyone in the Midwest is like, oh, Colorado, what a great life. I'm not sure that I saw moving to Colorado as a way to reset and reconnect with something that was beneficial for me as a human, as much as I'm going to post some sweet pics that are going to make my friends in Chicago jealous. And then getting out here, I quickly learned that getting out for hikes, getting out and skiing, getting out and biking, and really getting away from devices, away from other people, away from enclosed environments was something that not only brought me joy and happiness and relaxation, but also brought me creativity and new ideas. I still, to this day, have some of my most creative and best ideas while I'm out and about. And I will often either bring a pad of paper with me or dictate to my phone as I'm out doing something, these quick ideas that I can flesh out later when I finish my workout or my adventure. So I think I'm very fortunate that it happened all this way.
I love there's someone else that does that because I'm the same way. I'll be on a hike and all of a sudden just dictate an email to myself because I've solved a problem, back at home or at the office, and it's wild. Just our brains start doing that. I want to talk about there's a quote in one of your articles, and it says, "Our brains are not wired for the pace and pattern of modern life." I wonder if you can maybe dig into that and share, what how you think that is.
Kind of a more formal way to think about it is called the evolutionary mismatch theory, and this applies across many realms, but includes the idea of nature. But if we think about this as humans, we evolved for 99 point something percent of human history in the outdoors. We were in a place where we were in natural environments. We were getting a lot of movement, exercise, sunlight. We were looking at a very wide field of view. So you're spanning across whatever your environment is. You're looking in the distance and you're looking in different directions all at once, or kind of scanning across them. And we are having these brief moments where we're challenged, either by threat or by opportunity, and then prolonged periods of calm, quiet, rest. So, this is kind of what human evolution looked like for our hunter gatherer ancestors. However, fast forward where the mismatch occurs. So, our brain is evolved in that environment. And evolution happens very, very slowly. So, the Industrial Revolution, everything that's happened to allow us to live indoors in these comfortable environments without a lot of temperature fluctuation because we have AC and heat and all these kinds of things. This is very recent in human history. And our brains have yet to evolve to a place where that is where our brains are seated. Our brains are still in hunter gatherer territory because evolution takes so long to change the structure and function of the brain over time. Whereas culturally, we've changed much more quickly. So here we're in an environment now where humans tend to be predominantly indoors. The statistics show, on average, at least in the United States, 93% of our time or more is spent indoors. And that's on average. So many of us are spending more than that indoors. We see that we are getting much more exposure then to artificial light and less exposure to sunlight. We see that we are not seeing these temperature fluctuations. We are not having a wide field of view and scanning environments. We are looking at things 12 to 24 and sometimes 6 inches away from our face for prolonged periods of time, which is not how our visual system adapted, which is not how our brains have adapted. And we are not used to an environment in which we are constantly stimulated. So if we go back to our hunter gatherers, they were periods of challenge and opportunity, followed by prolonged periods of rest, relaxation, quiet, boredom, things like this. Now we are in an environment where we are constantly stimulated. We're constantly checking our email, checking our phone, checking the news, getting pinged by other people, trying to think about where do I need to be now and here and tomorrow, and what's my mortgage situation looking like, and am I saving enough for retirement? And we've evolved to this place where our society is constantly driving a stimulus driven environment versus a relaxed, calm environment. And our brains are not evolved to be in this. And this is, according to many theories and according to many researchers, reasons why we see so much high stress, see so much mental health challenges. So looking at things like anxiety and depression, there's likely tie-ins to the fact that we are in environments that are not conducive to our mental health. However, it's hard to become unstuck because as a society, we've determined, as you were mentioning earlier, this is important. Working hard is important. Doing better than the generation before is important. Being perceived as though you're working 24/7 is seen as a virtue and not a vice. And so here, a lot of us are accidentally trapped in this world in which we think we're doing all the right things, but we're sacrificing something so fundamentally important to being human, getting outdoors, being in a natural environment, that it's really hurting our mental and physical health.
It's funny when you mentioned that. I was thinking how whenever my family goes backpacking, people say, "Why do you do it?" And I tell people, it just feels right. It just feels good. And as you're talking, it's like, yeah, my body, my ancestors for thousands of years would spend all their time outside. And, going back now and spending 6 days basically in nature 24/7, it becomes, it's like a drug. Your body's like, oh yeah, this is how we're supposed to be. We're not supposed to be in front of our computer or I watch stupid videos on YouTube, probably like everybody
Yeah.
else. And it's like, oh, you'll waste 2 hours that way. And the body's not designed for that.
100%. And I feel the same way. I think a lot of these prolonged periods outdoor, it's very multifaceted. There's a lot of effects and factors. But when you get back to it, being in nature for prolonged periods increases people's sense of well being, reduces stress, improves your immune function. And the cool thing is, when you do it in the way that you and your family do it for prolonged periods, you see lasting benefits. So you're going to see the benefits of your 6-day backpacking trip days, weeks, months later, even when you're not outside at that point. And so here, when you're getting regular exposure to long periods outside, you're actually able to maybe not bank those forever, but you see much longer lasting benefits than just, I'm happy when I'm outside, and the second I'm back in the office on Monday morning, I'm upset. No, 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 no. The carryover effect is actually really strong. And this is really positively reinforcing. So those of us who lucked into it, or those of us who are maybe more intentional about getting into this or were raised that way, it self-reinforces and we look for more and more opportunities to do this. 10 years ago, I never would have thought about taking any sort of meeting I cared about outside. Never. And now I'm like, no, this is a wonderful place to be. As we're talking, I can look at the landscape around me and I understand how that's helping me think better.
Are there other ways that nature reshapes the brain, that's maybe more long lasting?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what we see, there's a lot of things going on, but really when I think about it and the way I think it's helpful to start thinking about it is the first thing that we see in terms of benefits for the brain with nature is an effect to calm and relax us. So when we're constantly stimulated in kind of the new age environment that I was describing earlier, we see a lot of activation in a brain region that sits kind of back in here. I'm pointing to the temples of my heads if you're listening. That's called the amygdala. So the amygdala here is a region in the brain that gets activated by things that are scary, things that we're fearful of, things that drive anxiety, and it produces fear, anxiety, anger, a lot of negative emotions. And when we're in a constant fight or flight behavioral state, this kind of stressed state, our amygdala gets activated and then can stay continuously low level activated. So we're constantly nervous, worried, anxious, fearful, aggressive. And here, what we see is nature actually can decrease the activity in the amygdala and instead increase activity in the prefrontal cortex, this area right in the front of your brain, which is responsible for many things, many executive functions. So, thinking, learning, decision making, risk assessment. But a big one for today's discussion is emotional regulation. The prefrontal cortex, one of its jobs is to recognize the activity patterns in the amygdala and quiet them down. But the ironic thing here is when the amygdala is firing, it causes release of a lot of cortisol, our stress hormone that circulates all through our body, has tons of effects. This actually comes back to the brain, that cortisol, and suppresses, inhibits, impairs the prefrontal cortex. And most of us know this intuitively. The more stressed we are, the worse decisions we tend to make. The more we tend to be irritable and snappy versus saying, okay, this is my child. They're 6 years old. Of course, they're going to be whining about something that's age appropriate, developmentally appropriate. I need to be the adult here and not snap back. When we are stressed, our prefrontal cortex can't think through all that as effectively. We react with our emotional centers. We snap at our kids. Fight escalates versus stopping and saying, let me take a deep breath and think about how I can parent this productively. So here we see the benefits of nature are going to help calm your brain and your nervous system, putting you in this more rest and digest state. We also see boosts in certain neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, and some what we call endogenous opioids, naturally produced in the brain, opioid type substances that are calming and actually pain relieving in many cases, which helps us do these 10, 12, 14-mile intense hikes without giving up halfway through because it's starting to get so difficult. You get that runner's high, that endorphin boost. But these actually boost our mood and are responsible for not only boosted mood, but enhanced motivation. Dopamine is all about motivating us. So when we get out in nature, we feel better, we feel more light, we feel more positive, and it also helps us feel more motivated. We have those bright ideas that you dictate into your phone or write down, and you feel really motivated to chase those rather than, oh, another thing to think about. These calming effects to relax us then have some subsequent effects. So we're feeling more calm, we're feeling more emotionally regulated with the prefrontal cortex front part of our brain. And what this helps us do is also restore our ability to focus and pay attention. So when we are constantly replying to email, checking this, trying to write this while someone's asking us to do something else, our directed attention starts to wear thin. It starts to lose its efficacy, and you start getting tired, not focusing as well. So what we see are even brief periods of time in the outdoors, in nature, can help us restore our attention, in part because our prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for attention, gets its energy back, isn't quite as inhibited. Additionally, when we're really stressed, we impair the formation of certain types of memories and our ability to be cognitively flexible. So if you're really stressed trying to, say, study for an exam or prepare a presentation, your brain is in a state of, I don't care about anything that's going to happen tomorrow. I only care about surviving right now. Those are the evolutionary roots of that type of stress response, to save us right now at the sacrifice of anything that might take longer, because if there is a tomorrow, we'll figure it out then. But here, that is impairing us when we're really stressed about a presentation, about a test, about something else like that, because we're stressed, we're trying to focus, and our brain is in a state that doesn't allow us to do that. It's saying, I don't care about this information. All I care about is what can I do to survive right now? We get tunnel vision. And by getting out in nature and calming ourselves down, it allows our brain to remember information better. It allows us to be more flexible. Oh, I thought this was going to go this way. It's actually moving in this direction. How do I pivot? How do I adapt? We do that better after exposure to nature. And then finally, we see boosted creativity and problem solving. So things like divergent thinking. So our ability to think about one idea that we've been mulling over at our computer all day, but think about it and apply it to different concepts. Think about how can I take this thing that I know and bring it to different directions in different ways. How can I creatively problem solve? Um, Being in nature actually boosts this. And I think that really drives the idea that we were both talking about earlier, that I have all these insights while I'm out and about that I don't have when I'm on my computer, when I'm in the house. Part of this is due to our ability to creatively problem solve in nature that we don't get when we are at our computer in the indoors. And the thing that I think about when I think about that last one in particular is if I'm consuming, I am not creating. So if
Ooh,
I'm
I like that.
yeah, right. If I'm constantly trying to search and chat GPT this and Google search this, and I'm learning about what everyone else thinks and what's already out there, that's good. You need to understand that. But I'm not producing anything while I'm learning all those things. I need to step away and let all of that churn, let my brain think about all that in order to more effectively create and do things, whether it's creating an effective email, a marketing campaign, creating content, or creating art or music. You need to let your brain kind of simmer with all that information. So the effects are very real and very powerful. And there's more, but those are the ones that are kind of some of the core components that come to mind.
I want to ask a little bit about relationships, and I know with my wife and I, we've done lots of long distance hikes where I really feel that's helped our relationship. And then with our kids, getting the devices where they don't work. We have these incredible times where we can actually just talk and have fairly adult conversations with them that aren't just about the newest toy or the newest video game. Is there science around how nature impacts relationships as well?
Absolutely. And the feelings that you have, first of all, that's something I love as well. I love that we're in a place. So I've got one daughter. She's just about 8 years old. So here, no devices for her yet, and we're going to hold off as long as is humanly possible. But even things like wanting to be distracted by other things, toys or a book. She loves to read, but that's not connecting with us. Getting away and being in a place where really the only option is to be together. There's a lot of science behind this, and there's some really interesting things to think about. Um, so why is it that we feel like this? One of the first things that comes up in the literature is empathy and compassion tend to be increased when we're in the outdoors. So we tend to feel increased feelings of empathy for others. I don't understand necessarily what you're going through, but I care about the fact that you're going through it um, and um, and contentedness as well. This idea of I'm not worried about myself as much. I'm happy with the way things are. These types of feelings drive more pro-social behavior. When you're thinking less about yourself, you're understanding others more, you tend to act in accordance with that. You tend to ask people questions to really seek out what they want to say versus just waiting for your turn to speak. You tend to talk towards others and act towards others in a way that is trying to actually help them versus you in fight or flight survival mode when you're stressed tend to focus in a self-centered manner. So here, getting outside increases pro-social behavior and activates certain regions of the brain that are required for effective social bonding. So a region of the prefrontal cortex that's actually the medial prefrontal cortex that sits kind of in the middle of your forehead right here, as well as a region back on the side of your head called the insula, which is all about feeling internally, like how do I feel viscerally? What's my gut feeling? These brain regions are required to effectively socially bond because you can have that visceral, guttural feeling of, oh my gosh, my wife's going through this. You can think about what might it be like to be my wife with your prefrontal cortex, and you can feel what might it be like to be my wife with your insula. And because these regions are more active, you're better able to connect with her, as opposed to it's the end of the night. You're both on your laptops after the kids have gone to bed. She's trying to tell you something, and you just want to get a few more emails out before you go to bed. You're not really listening in that moment. So you get these kind of social bonding from a parent child as well as a parent parent. These times to be outdoors are opportunities for unstructured play. So what we see are most of our lives are structured. Our kids are going to tennis and then to soccer and then to the pool in the summer or whatever they might do in basketball in the winter, things like that. It's structured play, organized, adult supervised, planned. Here, being in the outdoors tends to be unstructured. Let's go on a hike, and if we find a cool rock, let's climb it. Or, hey, let's see who can huck a pine cone the furthest, or let's skip rocks on this lake. This is unstructured play. And so here, having this opportunity for unstructured play and this shared exploration is a great opportunity to foster quality time. And so here, you're getting quality time where you all are engaged in activities together that are unstructured that you tend not to get in other times. Additionally, because you're less stressed as a parent, because your kids are less stressed as kids, all of these brain principles we just talked about apply to all of us. You're able to be more emotionally available, connected. You're able to have more patience and attend to your children better than when you're having some knee-jerk reactions and things like that. And this improves your communication. It improves your ability to connect. Additionally, what we tend to see is this improved emotional regulation that comes with being in the outdoors. Your prefrontal cortex is firing, 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 saying, hey, I know the thing that they said is really obnoxious, but I shouldn't be having a knee-jerk reaction. That emotional regulation. How can I talk to them in a way that I feel is appropriate, even though I'm kind of frustrated? Having that thought, that emotional regulation in the moment leads to better interactions, leads to improved, more positive interactions and connectiveness. Whereas when you're at home, you're stressed, you're trying to cook dinner, whatever it might be, you tend to then have a reaction that is less positive and can even spiral into a fight, for example. And then the benefit of being outdoors is you tend to have fewer of those negative interactions because of all the benefits you all are getting collectively. So here, these benefits in terms of fostering relationships and fostering stronger parent-child, parent-parent, spouse, friend relationships are real. And they're fueled also by the fact that you're in an undistracted environment. You're paying attention to each other. You're not paying attention to your phone. There's studies that show that even having a phone out on the table, if you're having a conversation, say at a coffee shop, your phone is out, even if it's face down, it actually leads to less depth in the topics you're talking about than if the phone was in a bag, not even in your pocket. And there's studies showing this. And so the idea of you're out and about hiking, your phone is away, it's not part of the adventure. You're going to have deeper, more meaningful conversations according to the science.
Wow, there's so much there, and there's just such a depth of knowledge you have on this topic. I wonder if you can maybe talk about you founded Manifest Wellness. How do you take all this knowledge and apply it to peoples and companies?
One of the reasons that I started Manifest Wellness is, as a neuroscientist, I had been researching and teaching neuroscience, brain science, and how the brain relates to mood, thought, cognition, bodily function for decades. So I had been in this space for my entire adult life. And I had learned quite a lot about how the brain works. And I had started getting much more interested, especially after moving out to Colorado, in what are the concrete benefits and what is the science that sits behind the effects I was feeling personally. And so as I started to learn about how real this was, and I started to teach it in my classrooms, I started to also realize how little of this most of us are aware of. And so for me, it took a lot of intentional time. I was fortunate to already be pretty science literate and in this field. But what I realize is most people don't have access to this information, in part because we don't have time, in part because they're not science kind of focused in their life. And so all of a sudden the information is brought to you in a way that's science heavy and you just back off because it's too much. And so what I really wanted to do with Manifest Wellness, what I really want to do with Manifest Wellness for those who work with me is to make that information accessible and turn it into sustainable and impactful action. How can we take all this information that's being researched in laboratories and out in the natural world and actually apply it to most people's day-to-day lives as opposed to letting it sit there in the academic ether? And so what I want to do is let's take this and make it actionable. Okay, we know that nature can, you know, stimulate your immune system, improve your immune system. What can we learn to allow us to leverage that? And then secondarily, my goal is to, because most people are busy, because most people can't overhaul their lives for wellness or to get outdoors or things like that, in the snap of a finger. How can we make small changes that lead to big transformations? So really, what are some of the smallest things that many of us can do that would lead to the most impact and allow that snowball to start and get the momentum moving so then it can roll downhill and all of a sudden you go from being a person who never gets out and does anything to a person in 5 years, maybe, that really embraces the outdoors, that really is feeling these benefits and is aging in a really effective way because of it. So, all of this is really meant to help people in a world in which I feel like we are salmon swimming upstream. The world around us is not looking to help us be well. The world around us, in my perspective, tends to be, about capturing our attention through especially social media platforms and news outlets, about eating food that isn't particularly good for us. We've got companies that are trying to drive increased food intake. Through creating hyper palatable and ultra processed foods, not because they care about our health per se, but because that drives the bottom line. And so, here, for most of us, the easiest path is the path that is least well, least healthy. Foods that are less healthy for us are cheaper. There's a lot of social justice implications here. So, how can we become educated and be empowered in how to live our lives the best we can without having to overhaul our lives overnight to do so?
We talked a lot about the outdoors, and you just touched on food and ultra processed foods. But are there other aspects of overall health that you look at when you're consulting with people?
When I look at the science, and that's really what drives me is, okay, what is science backed? What has been shown in the literature rather than solely anecdotally, and solely by kind of people's accounts? I want to know what science fleshes out to be real, because I wouldn't want to give people advice based on the fact that I heard someone once say that this was beneficial, because who knows? Everyone's different. So what does the science say should work? And so in this case, when you look at the science behind wellness practices, there are a number that stick out. And a lot of them overlap with what most of us think of as health and wellness. So, nutrition and eating healthy, nutrition rich, nutritive rich foods that are more whole foods, having high quality sleep as well as a good amount of sleep. So you can be laying in bed for the appropriate 7 to 9 hours, but how can you maximize the quality of sleep you're getting? How can we think about nature and the outdoors? How can we think about movement? Not necessarily exercise. You don't have to go out for your 30-minute run, but being someone who is moving around during the day is actually very, very beneficial. And so, how can we leverage movement in small doses so that even if you can't fit in a workout today, or you're not the type of person who's in shape to run or hike or whatever, what can you do to move your body in small ways to reap benefits? How can we be more mindful and understanding our world and being aware of how we feel, being aware of how others are affecting us, being aware of what's driving stress? And how can we then embrace that stress and understand that stress in our lives is actually a good thing? There's some really interesting literature on benefits of stress, and trying to push stress out of your life and have a fully stress free life could actually be a risk factor for mortality and disease. Whereas having purpose, stress, and meaning, which tend to always all go together, is actually a real benefit. And then finally, how can we work within the environment that we're kind of bound to for most of us with screens, with social media, with technology? How can we use those intentionally versus letting them use us and pull us in? And so when I work with clients, when I work with organizations, usually we don't cover all of that, certainly not at once. It's quite a bit, but trying to hone in on for that organization, for that person, what's the lowest hanging fruit? Maybe you want to become an ultra marathoner and that's your goal and it looks super cool and you've got all these idols you look at on Instagram, but maybe you got some knee issues and that's not the place to start. But you live in a place where it's really easy to get to farmers markets and really easy access to some high quality seafood. Let's start with the low hanging fruit and work with your diet first and see those cascading effects into all the other realms.
You mentioned earlier, how do people fit this into a modern lifestyle? You just mentioned some low hanging fruit. Are there some, easy wins for somebody who's listening who works 40 hours a week, who's, a weekend warrior, and they're just trying to find things that aren't going to overhaul their life. They want to, do some small tweaks. Are there some small tweaks that apply to a lot of people that you've seen?
The smaller and the more incremental, the better. I think a lot of people have an excitement when they want to be on a new journey. They want to, okay, I'm ready to embrace health and wellness now. I've been focused so much on my career for so long. I need to take care of myself too. And they want to, that, where we're used to looking at 10, 20, 30, 40-second videos on social media platforms as we see people transform their lives. And what happens is implicitly we think we can do that too. I go to the gym tomorrow and all of a sudden I should have a lot more muscle tone. And what most of us don't realize is it's small incremental change over time. And so we tend to get overexcited. We want to change everything all at once. It is unsustainable. It's actually very defeating. Oh, I can't. How do people even do this? I tried getting up and doing my ice bath and then journaling and then meditating and then having a calm turmeric latte and then planning my intentions for the day and setting my goals all before my kids are up at 6:30. Like I got up at 4:30. I still didn't get it all done and now I'm exhausted. Absolutely, you are. How can we take that excitement and focus you in on a couple of small changes? So when it comes to nature, for example, or thinking about the outdoors environment, some things that I like to think about are first and foremost, how can you bring nature in? If you're in an office, you're in the home quite a bit. Bringing in a houseplant, for example, has been shown to be beneficial for focus, attention, cognition, and emotion. Even looking at a picture of a natural environment, setting your desktop as a photo of a natural environment you love, or taking whatever Apple gives to you that's a natural environment, has been shown scientifically to be beneficial. There was this fantastic study a number of years ago that had individuals doing challenging cognitive demanding tasks. And so they would work for a half hour, and then half of the group would look at a picture of a rooftop in an urban setting, like a flat rooftop in the middle of a city, for 40 seconds. And then they would go back and do another 30 minutes of work, and they were being assessed on how well they focused and how well they did the work. The other group looked at that same rooftop in the same city, but the only difference was the rooftop was covered in greenery, plants, shrubs, things like that, like a rooftop garden. And after that 40 seconds of just looking at a screen with a very urban but somewhat green natural environment, the individuals who saw that were able to better focus and better pay attention to information while they were continuing this mental toughness task, as opposed to those who had looked at mostly the same image but without the green space.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So here, sit yourself next to a window. Look outside. So instead of looking only at your screen every few minutes, look up and look around and take 30, 40, 1 minute, for 30, 40 seconds, 1 minute to glance at these. How can you step outside during the day? Maybe you're working inside and you have meetings, rather than answering emails inside that you can answer perhaps later, or have a chat with your boss, your coworker, instead of taking it in an office. Step outside, take it right out front with a glass of water, with your cup of coffee. If even better, if you can take a quick stroll, having walking meetings. There's very real science around creativity, problem solving, and walking meetings. So yeah, you got 10 minutes. Maybe it takes 1 minute to walk out the door and 1 minute to get back. You can get 5 to 8 solid minutes of standing outside. Even if you happen to be checking your phone and answering emails there, it's better than being in your office. So here, start with these small things. And what you'll see is they naturally reinforce. Nature feels good with that dopamine hit. Nature is motivating to get anything done because it boosts dopamine, which is about reward, but also motivation. You'll find that it's easier to take step two and spend more time outside, spend 20, 30 minutes taking a walk, if you've started with step one, felt those natural reinforcers.
Jamie, it's been so great to hear about all the science behind, why this feels certain way, or uh, just why it's so beneficial to have this lifestyle based on being outdoors. I want to say thanks for coming on and sharing all your knowledge and wisdom.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure, Richard. And I'm so glad to hear that you and your family are really living this life and being able to reap all these benefits. And for those listeners out there who are already doing these things, keep doing what you're doing. And the more you learn about this, the more you can more intentionally leverage the benefits you're getting from already being outdoors. And for those who are listening to this with aspirations of becoming more outdoorsy and adventurous, keep moving towards it. It is the best thing that I've ever done in my life, but it doesn't happen overnight. And so it's a pleasure. I love sharing this because I'm so passionate about the benefits. And I really hope that all you out there listening and watching are feeling motivated to take some small steps to improve wherever you are in your life.
If people want to find out more, where can they find you?
Absolutely. So my website is manifestwellness.co. And I've got all my information there, as well as a contact page for a free wellness consultation booking. I do meetings with people. If you want to talk a little bit more about, Jamey, this was awesome stuff. How do I fit it into my life? I love working through people on these types of problems. How can we help you specifically? And then in addition, I'll have Richard, you and your team drop a link. I have got a wellness PDF document for 10 of what I think are some really impactful small wellness habit changes you can make day to day. And if you're interested in these, and it gives a little bit of the science behind why it works as well for each of these, I'll have the link there. You can grab that PDF and start looking at, where am I on these 10 things? Where could I improve? What excites me? What do I want to not really focus on right now?
That's wicked. I'll put those links into the show notes so everyone can check those out. And with that, thanks everyone for listening to this episode of the 10 Adventures podcast. We'll be back next week to explore the world and hear about more epic adventures. Bye-bye.
Start planning your own adventure by visiting us at 10adventures.com and listen to other episodes of the 10 Adventures podcast on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you find your podcasts.